The plasma cannon hummed ominously in Kithra's weathered hands as she carefully dismantled its energy core with the precision of a surgeon. Around her, the gleaming office of Nexus Corporation's 47th floor stretched into shadows, its floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the sprawling cityscape of New Geneva below. The year 2387 had brought humanity to the stars, but some truths remained buried in the darkness between them. To anyone watching the security feeds, she was simply designation 7749, another anonymous cleaning worker from the outer colonies. Invisible and unremarkable as she moved through the corporate maze with her maintenance cart, her gray uniform bore no name, only a barcode that marked her as expendable labor from the asteroid mining settlements. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so perfectly calculated. The weapon's alien architecture told a story that made her jaw clench. Hilarion technology, unmistakable in its crystalline complexity. The energy signatures matched perfectly with the readings she'd taken from the decimated remains of Colony Epsilon 7 3 months ago. 7,000 souls, miners, engineers, families reduced to cosmic dust by weapons that officially didn't exist. Her fingers traced the weapon's serial markings, each symbol a piece of evidence that would shake the foundations of human space. Nexus Corporation hadn't just been selling arms to humanity's enemies. They'd been providing the Hilarion Syndicate with the exact specifications needed to slaughter human colonies efficiently. The random pirate attacks that had claimed dozens of settlements weren't random at all. They were field tests for weapons designed by human hands. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the marble corridors. Kithra's enhanced hearing, a gift from her days in Colonial Defense Force Special Operations, picked up the distinctive gait before the elevator chimed. Heavy, confident strides that belonged to someone who owned everything he surveyed. The footsteps paused outside the executive suite. Valdric Cromwell, Nexus Corporation's enigmatic CEO, stood silhouetted in the doorway. His reputation preceded him, a self-made billionaire who'd built his empire on the backbone of humanity's expansion into space. At 42, he commanded fleets of cargo vessels, mining operations on 17 worlds, and the loyalty of politicians across 3 star systems. The media painted him as humanity's great industrialist, the man who'd made the stars profitable. He watched her work with curious detachment, seeing only what her cover identity projected: a middle-aged woman from the colonies, probably desperate enough to take any job that paid. His pale blue eyes held no recognition of the decorated war hero who'd once stood between humanity and extinction during the Proxima Centauri crisis. Working late tonight, he observed, his voice carrying the refined accent of someone educated on Earth's most prestigious stations. Kithra didn't look up from her task, letting her voice carry the weariness of someone who'd never seen anything beyond asteroid mines and corporate cleaning contracts. Night shifts pay better, sir? Got debts back home. The lie came easily, woven from the truth of 1,000 colonial workers' stories. What she didn't mention was the real debt, the 7,000 lives that Nexus Corporation owed to the Void, and the promise she'd made over their unmarked graves. Cromwell nodded, already losing interest, and disappeared into his private office. Through the transparent walls, she watched him settle behind his desk, illuminated by holographic displays, showing profit margins and shipping routes that connected human space like a glowing web. He had no idea that tonight, his carefully constructed empire would begin to crumble, one hidden truth at a time. Valdric Cromwell prided himself on reading people the way he read quarterly reports: quickly, efficiently, and with an eye for hidden value or potential threats. In his 20 years of building Nexus Corporation from a single freight hauler into humanity's largest interstellar conglomerate, he'd learned that success meant knowing who could be trusted, who could be bought, and who needed to be eliminated. The cleaning woman troubled him, though he couldn't articulate why. Her movements were too efficient, too purposeful. She cleaned with the methodical precision of someone following a pattern, not the random efficiency of career janitorial staff. More unsettling were the moments when she thought no one was watching. Her posture would shift, her eyes would sharpen, and for just an instant, she looked like someone who'd seen combat. His private terminal chimed with an encrypted message from his security chief. The overnight surveillance logs showed anomalous activity in restricted storage level 7. Someone had accessed the experimental weapons cache using executive-level clearance codes. The timestamp matched exactly with the cleaning woman's arrival on his floor. Cromwell's blood turned to ice water. Storage level 7 contained prototypes that officially didn't exist. Weapon systems developed through shadow contracts with entities that humanity wasn't supposed to know about. The Hilarion Syndicate had paid handsomely for human ingenuity, and the results had exceeded everyone's expectations. He pulled up the woman's employment file. Designation 7749, hired through a temp agency that specialized in outer colony labor. Background checks showed the standard profile: financial hardship, family obligations, no criminal record. But as he dug deeper into the databases, inconsistencies began to emerge. The woman's biometric data didn't match perfectly with her identification, close enough to pass automated screening, but a human eye could spot the discrepancies. Her medical records showed old injury patterns consistent with military service, specifically combat trauma. Most damning of all, her retinal scan triggered a buried alert in the Colonial Defense Force database, a classified marker that should have been impossible for a civilian to possess. Through his office's transparent walls, he watched her work. She'd moved on to another section of the building, but her cleaning cart seemed unusually heavy. More concerning, she kept checking a device concealed in her sleeve, something that definitely wasn't. STANDARD maintenance equipment. Cromwell activated his personal security protocol, sealing his office and alerting his private security team. But as he reached for his communication array, the woman looked directly at him through the walls. For the first time, her mask slipped completely. The eyes that met his belonged to a predator. Cathara Voss had been the Colonial Defense Force's most decorated operative before Colony Epsilon 7. She'd held the line at Proxima Centauri when 3 alien species had tried to claim human space. She'd personally killed over 200 enemy combatants and saved countless human lives. Her military record was classified so deeply that most people believed she was a myth, but Epsilon 7 had broken something in her. 7,000 people, including her own sister's family, murdered by weapons that bore human serial numbers. The official investigation had been buried. The evidence disappeared, and the survivors told to accept relocation compensation and stay quiet. She'd spent 3 months infiltrating Nexus Corporation, building a cover identity, and gathering evidence. Tonight, she'd found the smoking gun prototype weapon systems that matched the energy signatures from the colony massacre, purchase orders signed by Cromwell himself, communication logs with Hilarion commanders discussing field testing effectiveness against human defensive systems. The man sitting behind that desk wasn't just a war profiteer. He was a genocidal architect who'd sold humanity's own children to their enemies for profit. As she watched him realize the scope of his exposure, she felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. Valdric Cromwell had built his empire on the graves of innocence, and tonight, those graves would finally have their justice. The security teams were already mobilizing, but they were too late. She'd spent months studying their protocols, their response times, their blind spots. By the time they reached this floor, the evidence would be transmitted to every news network, military command, and civilian authority in human space. The great industrialist was about to learn that some debts could never be paid with money. The security lockdown sirens wailed through Nexus Corporation's headquarters as Valdric Cromwell realized he was trapped in his own fortress. His office's smart glass walls had automatically opaqued during the security alert, but he could hear boots pounding through the corridors as his tactical teams deployed. Unfortunately, they were following protocols designed to keep threats out, not to contain someone who was already inside and clearly knew the building better than they did. Through his personal communicator, status reports flooded in with growing urgency. The intruder had vanished from the 47th floor. Storage Level 7's security had been compromised, not hacked, but systematically dismantled by someone with intimate knowledge of Nexus defensive systems. Most alarmingly, his private data vaults were being accessed remotely by an unknown user with administrative privileges that shouldn't exist. Cromwell pulled up the security feeds, cycling through hundreds of cameras, but the woman had simply evaporated. His security chief's voice crackled through the "Sir, we're tracking multiple false heat signatures throughout the building. Someone's deployed military-grade countermeasures. This isn't corporate espionage, this is a full-scale intelligence operation." The lights in his office suddenly dimmed, then flickered in a pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 shorts. Morse code, SOS. But it wasn't a call for help, it was a mockery. Someone was playing with him. His terminal screen activated without input, displaying a single line of text. Epsilon 7 remembers. The name hit him like a physical blow. Colony Epsilon 7 had been one of his most profitable ventures, a mining operation in the Outer Rim that had discovered rich deposits of rare elements essential for advanced ship construction. When the Hilarion Syndicate had approached him about testing new pacification protocols, the payment offered had been astronomical. The colony's destruction had been regrettable, but necessary for the greater good of human expansion, at least. That's how he'd rationalized it to himself. A new message appeared. "Conference Room Alpha, come alone. You have 5 minutes before the evidence goes public." Cromwell's hands shook as he weighed his options. His security teams couldn't find one woman in a building designed to be impregnable. His private communication channels were compromised. Worst of all, someone had evidence of transactions that could not only destroy his empire, but see him executed for crimes against humanity. He made his way through corridors that had become alien territory, each shadow potentially concealing a threat. The building's automated systems seemed to be working against him, elevators stopping at wrong floors, security doors sealing unexpectedly, surveillance cameras tracking his movement like predatory eyes. Conference Room Alpha was Nexus Corporation's crown jewel, vast chamber with a holographic display system capable of projecting real-time data from across human space. When Cromwell entered, the displays were active, showing him the true scope of his crimes. Colony Epsilon 7 burned in 3-dimensional glory. The attack recorded from 17 different angles. Hilarion weapons tore through defensive systems with surgical precision, targeting exactly the vulnerabilities that Nexus technical specifications had identified. Evacuation shuttles exploded in brilliant flowers of flame as prototype guidance systems directed munitions with flawless accuracy. 7,000 human beings died in 23 minutes. Men, women, children, families who'd trusted in humanity's protection. The audio track carried their final transmissions, voices calling for help that would never come. Parents promising children that the rescue ships were on their way. "You sold them the weapons," a voice said from the shadows. "You gave our enemies the exact tools they needed to kill efficiently." Kithara Voss stepped into the light, no longer bothering with her cleaning woman disguise. She wore the black tactical gear of Colonial Defense Force Special Operations. Her equipment harness heavy with devices that could level the building if necessary, but her most dangerous weapon was the cold fury in her eyes. 47 colonies, she continued, her voice steady as judgment. Over 200,000 dead. All so you could profit from both sides of humanity's expansion. Cromwell found his voice, falling back on the arguments that had let him sleep at night. The colonies were always vulnerable. If not the Hilarions, someone else would have. "My sister lived on Epsilon 7, Kithara interrupted. "Her husband, Their twin daughters, age 7. They sent me pictures 2 days before you murdered them. She activated a holographic display, showing a family portrait a woman who looked remarkably like Cathara, smiling beside a man and 2 young girls, with bright eyes and futures that would never come. For the first time in 20 years, Valdric Cromwell truly saw the cost of his ambition. Valdric Cromwell stared at the holographic image of the family, and something fundamental cracked inside his chest. The 2 little girls couldn't have been older than 7, with gap-toothed smiles and their mother's fierce eyes. They wore matching jumpsuits with patches, declaring them future space explorers. Their small hands clasped together in the unconscious way of twins who'd never known a moment apart. Lyra and Zara Thorne, Cathara said, her voice carrying the weight of a gravestone inscription. They wanted to be starship engineers like their father. Lyra collected alien crystals, and Zara loved to paint nebulae. They had plans to visit Earth for their 8th birthday. The hologram shifted, showing security footage from Epsilon 7's final hours. The twins huddled with their parents in an emergency shelter as Hilarion weapons carved through the colonies. Defenses. The shelter's reinforced walls, built to Nexus Corporation's safety specifications, lasted exactly as long as Cromwell's technical data had predicted they would when provided to the enemy. You knew, Cathara continued, circling him, like a hunter. Every defensive weakness, every evacuation protocol, every hiding place where families might seek shelter. You sold that information for 300 million credits and a 20% stake in Hilarion rare earth mining operations. Cromwell's legs gave out, and he collapsed into a chair as the full scope of his crimes materialized around him in holographic horror. Colony after colony, burning with weapons he'd helped design. Children's faces in the final moments before Nexus Corporation's business partnerships claimed their lives. The Hilarions weren't just buying weapons, he whispered, the truth finally breaking through decades of rationalization. They were buying human extinction protocols. Slow extinction, Cathara confirmed. Test the weapons on isolated colonies, refine the tactics, gather intelligence on human defensive capabilities. Your data didn't just help them kill efficiently, it helped them learn how to kill all of us. She activated another display showing intercepted Hilarion communications, automatically translated by Nexus Corporation's own alien language algorithms. The conversations detailed plans for systematic extermination of human space, starting with the colonies and working inward toward Earth itself. The Outer Rim settlements weren't just casualties, they were training exercises for genocide. Phase 1. Eliminate outlying settlements to test weapon effectiveness and human response capabilities. Cathara read from the translated documents. Phase 2. Disrupt supply lines and communication networks using intelligence provided by Asset Cromwell. Phase 3. Coordinate multi-species alliance for final assault on core human worlds. Cromwell buried his face in his hands as the magnitude of his betrayal became clear. He hadn't just been a war profiteer, he'd been the architect of humanity's potential extinction. Every credit earned, every business expansion, every moment of personal triumph had been built on the foundation of species-level treason. The Hilarions show these recordings to their young, Cathara said, gesturing to footage of Colony Epsilon 7's destruction. They call it the day humans sold themselves. You're literally a hero in their culture, the human who proved that any species willing to murder its own children for profit deserves extinction. The conference room's communications system activated without input, broadcasting the conversation to every Nexus facility across human space. Employees, shareholders, military liaisons, and civilian contractors were hearing their CEO's crimes, detailed in real time. Stock prices were already crashing as the evidence flooded public networks. But Cromwell barely noticed the collapse of his empire. He was staring at Lyra and Zara Thorne's faces, seeing his own reflection in their dying eyes. 7 years old. They'd been 7 years old when his signature on a contract had signed their death warrant. You could have been humanity's greatest, industrialist Cathara said, her voice softening with something that might have been pity. Instead, you chose to be our greatest traitor. Through the conference room's massive windows, Earth hung in the void like a blue jewel. 3 billion souls who had no idea how close they'd come to extinction, how close they still were, if the Hilarion plans proceeded on schedule. What do you want? Cromwell asked, his voice broken. Money, my companies, my life. Cathara shook her head. I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to feel the weight of every life you sold. And then I want you to help me stop what's coming. For the first time since entering the room, Cromwell looked directly at her. What's coming? The holographic displays shifted one final time, showing Hilarion fleet movements detected by deep space monitoring stations. Hundreds of ships, massing at the edge of human space. The invasion fleet that Cromwell's intelligence had made possible. Phase 3, Cathara said simply. And thanks to you, they know exactly how to kill us all. The weight of 3 billion lives settled on Valdric Cromwell's shoulders as the holographic displays showed Hilarion battle fleets moving through deep space like a plague of metal locusts. Each ship bore weapons systems he'd helped perfect, guided by tactical data he'd provided, crewed by beings who saw humanity as a cancer to be excised from the galaxy. The invasion begins in 72 hours, Cathara said, her voice clinical as she manipulated the tactical displays. 16 primary targets, including Earth's orbital defense platforms. They'll hit our industrial centers first, cripple our ability to manufacture weapons or coordinate resistance. After that, it's systematic extermination of civilian populations. Cromwell studied the fleet formations with the eye of someone who'd spent decades analyzing shipping routes and cargo capacities. The Hilarions had assembled enough firepower to glass entire continents. But more terrifying was the surgical precision of their plan. They weren't coming to conquer, they were coming to erase. Colonial Defense Force estimates we'll lose 80% of human space within the first week, she continued. The remaining colonies will surrender or be destroyed piecemeal over the following months. Earth itself might last a year under siege, but the outcome is inevitable. Unless, Cromwell asked, because there was always an unless. He'd built his fortune on finding advantages that others missed, on seeing opportunities in apparent disasters. Unless we give them a reason to reconsider, Cathara replied. The Hilarions respect strength above all else. They began this campaign because they believed humans were too weak and divided to pose a real threat. Your weapons sales convinced them we'd sell out our own species for profit. She activated a new display showing Colonial Defense Force assets scattered across human space, undermanned, under-equipped, and completely unprepared for an enemy that knew their every tactical doctrine and defensive weakness. But there's something the Hilarions don't know, she continued. Something you never sold them because you never knew it existed. The display shifted to show classified military installations that weren't on any Nexus Corporation database. Deep space research facilities, experimental weapons programs, and, most importantly, a network of sleeper ships launched decades ago as humanity's ultimate insurance policy. Project Lazarus, Cromwell breathed, recognizing references from old government contracts. The Doomsday Fleet, 50 ships equipped with weapons that violate every interstellar treaty humanity ever signed, Cathara confirmed. Planet crackers, stellar disruptors, biological weapons that can sterilize entire star systems, built in absolute secrecy and hidden in the void between galaxies, waiting for the day someone threatened human extinction. Cromwell felt a chill that had nothing to do with the conference room's climate control. Those weapons could kill billions. Trillions, she corrected. The Hilarion Syndicate encompasses 47 worlds and 3 client species. Project Lazarus was designed to ensure that if humanity died, we'd take our killers with us. Mutual assured destruction on a galactic scale. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Humanity's military leadership had learned from his betrayal and prepared for species-level war. The coming battle wouldn't just determine humanity's survival, it would decide whether entire civilizations lived or died. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because Project Lazarus can only be activated by civilian authority," Cathera explained. "The military learned from human history that soldiers shouldn't have the power to end worlds. It requires authorization from 3 megacorporation CEOs, the Colonial Senate President, and one other person." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "The individual responsible for the crisis requiring Lazarus activation. The person whose actions brought humanity to the brink of extinction gets to decide whether we take our enemies with us." Cromwell understood. His signature on Hilarion weapons contracts had made him the trigger for humanity's ultimate weapon. The same hand that had signed death warrants for 200,000 colonists would now decide the fate of civilizations. "If I refuse?" he asked. "Humanity dies alone," Cathera replied. "The Hilarions complete their genocide, expand into our territory, and eventually encounter other species to exploit and destroy. Your betrayal becomes the first step in galactic extinction, and if I agree, we broadcast the Lazarus authorization codes to every Hilarion commander. We show them exactly what humanity is capable of when cornered. We give them one chance to withdraw their fleets and return to their own space." Cromwell stared at the tactical displays, seeing not just the immediate crisis, but the long-term implications. Either humanity would die as victims, or they would transform into something that could threaten entire civilizations. Either way, his actions had fundamentally changed what it meant to be human. "There's a third option," he said slowly. "Something you haven't considered." Cathera raised an eyebrow. "What if we don't threaten them?" Cromwell continued. "What if instead of mutual destruction, we offer mutual prosperity?" For the first time since the confrontation began, Cathera looked genuinely surprised. "The Hel came to me because they needed human ingenuity," Cromwell explained, his mind racing through possibilities. "Our adaptability, our innovation, our willingness to take risks. They have the military power, but they lack the creativity to build a sustainable galactic civilization." He stood up, pacing as the outline of a plan took shape. "We give them something more valuable than conquest. We give them partnership." In the depths of space, aboard the Hilarion flagship Dominion's Edge, Fleet Commander Zareth received the transmission that would determine the fate of 2 species. The message bore encryption codes that only one human possessed, the asset who had made their invasion possible through systematic betrayal of his own kind. The conference room at Nexus Corporation had been transformed into a makeshift command center, with communication arrays powerful enough to reach across star systems. Veldrick Cromwell sat before the transmitter, his face haggard but his voice steady as he prepared to gamble with the lives of every human in the galaxy. "Commander Zareth," Cromwell began, "this is Asset Cromwell. I'm transmitting new intelligence that requires immediate strategic consideration." Cathera watched from the shadows, her finger resting on the trigger of Project Lazarus activation. If Cromwell's gambit failed, she was prepared to ensure that humanity's extinction would come at an unthinkable cost to their enemies. The Hilarion commander's response came after a delay measured in light minutes, translated by the same algorithms that had decoded their original genocidal plans. "Asset Cromwell, your species' final hours approach. What intelligence could possibly alter our course?" "The intelligence that your species is committing suicide," Cromwell replied, "and I can prove it." He activated the holographic displays, transmitting data streams that would make any economist weep. Trade route analyses, resource allocation models, and economic projections that painted a stark picture of galactic reality. "You're planning to exterminate humanity, to claim our territory and resources," Cromwell continued. but you're ignoring the fundamental mathematics of interstellar civilization. Without human innovation, your empire will collapse within a century. The data told a story that military strategists had missed, but economists could read like scripture. Human space wasn't valuable for its territory or raw materials. It was valuable for its adaptive capacity. Humans didn't just exploit resources. They created new ones. They didn't just occupy worlds. They transformed them. Every Hilarion technological advancement in the past 50 years has been derived from human innovations, Cromwell explained, his voice gaining strength as he fell into familiar territory. Your improved faster-than-light drives use human quantum mechanics. Your energy weapons incorporate human materials science. Your agricultural systems are based on human terraforming techniques. He paused, letting the implications sink in across the light years. You're not just planning to kill your enemy. You're planning to kill your partner. Commander Zareth's response carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been present before. Humans are weak, divided. You have proven this through your willingness to betray your own species. I proved that humans are pragmatic, Cromwell corrected. We understand that survival sometimes requires uncomfortable choices. Just as you should understand that extinction is bad for business. The holographic displays shifted to show economic projections for a partnership-based model. Human creativity and adaptability, combined with Hilarion military strength and organizational efficiency. Trade routes that would make both species wealthy beyond imagination. Technological developments that could transform the galaxy. Look at the numbers, Commander. Really, look at them. In a partnership model, both our species become dominant powers in this galactic region. In an extinction model, you become a declining empire managing dead worlds. Kythera stepped into the light, adding her voice to the transmission. And if you choose extinction, you'll discover what humans are truly capable of when we have nothing left to lose. She activated a partial display of Project Lazarus assets, just enough to demonstrate that humanity's death would not be quiet or clean. Weapons that could crack planets, biological agents that could sterilize star systems, and the grim mathematics of mutual assured destruction. We have the capacity to take 47 Hilarion worlds with us into extinction, she said coldly. But we'd prefer to make them 47 worlds that share in mutual prosperity. The silence that followed lasted 17 minutes, long enough for messages to traverse space and for an alien military commander to consult with powers beyond human understanding. When Zareth responded, his tone had shifted from confident aggression to something approaching respect. You offer partnership after betrayal. Why should the Hilarion Syndicate trust the species that sold their own children? Cromwell looked directly into the camera, his eyes holding the weight of 7,000 graves and the hope of 3 billion lives. Because I'm not offering you trust, he said. I'm offering you proof. Verifiable, measurable, mutually beneficial. Proof that our species are more valuable to each other alive than dead. He activated the final display, a comprehensive trade proposal that would reshape galactic civilization. Resource-sharing agreements, joint technological development programs, and most importantly, verification protocols that would make betrayal impossible for either side. 1-year trial partnership, Cromwell continued. Full transparency, shared benefits, and at the end of 12 months, we evaluate whether cooperation or extinction serves both our interests better. The response, when it came, would determine whether Valdric Cromwell was remembered as humanity's greatest traitor or its unlikely savior. The Hilarion Syndicate will consider your proposal, Commander Zareth replied. Maintain current positions. We will provide our decision within 1 solar day. As the transmission ended, Kythera looked at Cromwell with something that might have been respect, that was either brilliant or suicidal. With stakes this high, Cromwell replied, there's rarely a difference. Outside the conference room windows, Earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that its children had just gambled their survival on the economics of interstellar cooperation. In 72 hours, they would learn whether human ingenuity could transform enemies into partners, or whether the galaxy was simply too small for two sapient species to share. Either way, Valdric Cromwell had finally found a use for his skills that might justify the cost of acquiring them. Epilogue. 6 months later, the joint Hilarion-human trade station, orbiting the former Colony Epsilon 7 site, bustled with activity that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Where once there had been only the charred remains of human dreams, now stood a monument to what cooperation could achieve when survival demanded innovation. Kythera Voss, now director of interspecies security, watched through the observation deck as Hilarion engineers worked alongside human technicians to install the latest breakthrough in faster-than-light communication. The partnership had yielded technological advances that neither species could have achieved alone, and the economic benefits were already transforming both civilizations. "The memorial is ready for dedication," she told Valdric Cromwell, who stood beside her wearing the simple uniform of a colonial development administrator. His fortune was gone, seized to fund reparations for the families he'd betrayed. But he'd found something more valuable in the work of building what his crimes had nearly destroyed. The memorial bore the names of all 200,000 souls lost to his betrayal, with Lyra and Zara Thorne's names etched in crystal that would catch starlight for 1,000 years. It was a reminder of the cost of his choices, and a promise that their deaths had meaning if they prevented future ones. "Commander Zeroth wants to attend the ceremony," Cromwell said, his voice still carrying the weight of grief that would never fully leave him. "He says the Hilarion Syndicate has a tradition of honoring those whose sacrifice enables growth." Kythera nodded. The alien commander had become an unlikely ally in the months since the partnership began. His species understood that strength wasn't just about military power. It was about the wisdom to choose cooperation over conquest when both options were available. "The colony survivors have agreed to return," she continued. "They want to help build a new settlement. They say Epsilon 7 deserves to live again." Through the station's massive windows, construction ships could be seen laying the foundations for a new kind of human colony, one built on principles of interspecies cooperation and shared prosperity. It would be a symbol of what was possible when former enemies chose to become partners. Cromwell watched the construction with eyes that had learned to see beyond profit margins to the true value of human potential. He would spend the rest of his life making amends for his crimes. But for the first time since Colony Epsilon 7 burned, he believed that redemption might be possible. The stars that had once seemed like distant markets now looked like homes waiting to be built, and in the space between worlds, two species were learning that the galaxy was vast enough for cooperation, innovation, and the kinds of dreams that could only be achieved together. The memorial's crystal surface caught the light of 7 suns, sending rainbows across the observation deck that looked almost like the gap-toothed smiles of 2 little girls who had wanted to explore the stars. Their dreams would never be fulfilled, but they had made possible a future where other children, human and Hilarion alike, could reach for the same impossible heights. It was perhaps the most valuable transaction Valdric Cromwell had ever negotiated,